If I mentioned boomerangs, you would immediately think of an Aboriginal Australian boomerang like this one. Well, I want to talk about different type of boomerang. And here we have got a pair of London-made ash boomerangs, and they were probably made for sport. A precursor, if you will, of a modern day frisbee. They come in a pine press, and if we have a closer look here, we can see that it's stamped with a maker's details and a registration number. Now the maker's details are for Buchanan, Pall Mall, London, and the registration number is for 1906. Well, if we undo the press, we can take out the boomerangs and have a closer look at those. So they're made of ash, they're shaped to the top and flat to the back, and we can see here that we've got a different registration number to the press on these two, but that number's also good for 1906. And also on this one, we've got a partial paper label for the seller, Buchanan Pall Mall. They're slightly shaped there, so presumably that's a handle to throw them. Whether they come back or not, I don't know. I have to admit I haven't tried them. But I would imagine that they're probably quite well tested and dig. Now we can see on the ends that they are a little bit chewed. Now that's either come from them being used and thrown and hitting against a hard surface, but I think it's probably also a slight consequence of the press being a very exact size. So there's no room for error on this press, and it's a very tight fit. If you get the boomerangs too close to these bolts and tighten them up, they're going to chew into the wood. So Buchanan, who were they? Well, the company was set up by James Buchanan, the Scot who was born in 1809. He moved to London in 1840, and by 1846 he had premises at 191 Piccadilly. And he was one of the 4 best bow makers in the country. He was very well known for his skill at making bows and archery equipment, and this is really what the company was built on. By 1857, he'd moved premises to 215 Piccadilly. Now that's right on Piccadilly Circus, so an even better shop than 191. Even more people passing through Piccadilly and seeing his goods. And he also moved into other areas apart from archery. He started making and selling croquet equipment, and then later tennis equipment as the sports grew in popularity, and also advertised at later dates polo equipment and cricket equipment. And in the 1850s he was even shipping goods to India. And in fact, a later advert, 1857 I think it is, notes that he's got agents in Bombay, Smith Taylor and Co. So the business was really doing very well. He also sold his equipment to Queen Victoria and later more members of the royal family, and also the Emperor of Russia and the Emperor of Brazil, thank you very much, and eventually was granted a royal warrant for selling his goods. The company was successful throughout the second half of the 19th century. James died in 1889, aged 80, and around about 5 years later it became a limited company from Buchanan to Buchanan and Co. Limited. By 1900, they'd moved address from 215 Piccadilly to 15 Pall Mall. Still a good address, a good area, but perhaps not quite as good as being on Piccadilly Circus. They carried on through the early part of the 19th century, and of course these are registered 1906. So it's at this point that these were made and sold. But with the Great War, the company seems to have really suffered and disappeared. They're still at 15 Pall Mall 1916, but they'd moved to part of the premises 15A Pall Mall rather than a whole of the building. They also shared their premises with Colt's Firearms. But by 1917, we can no longer find them in the trade directories, and the Canadian Red Cross Society has moved into 15A Pall Mall. So we can presume that at that point, Buchanan Limited had wound up as a business. But these are very interesting things. I mean, the question is really, if you wanted to find more, where would you be able to? I don't know. I've never seen any others. But sum them up, they are sporting bamboos. They are made of ash by Buchanan Limited, and they come in a pine press, and both press and the Boomerangs have got registration numbers dating them to 1906.